Let me be right by your side, cause I know that this is right. Don't be shy, just get to know me. We can take this somewhere else, you and me.
Welcome again to the chat. As you know, I love talking to everyone from the wider racing and breeding industries. And recently I spoke to Edward Cummings, who's one of the Hawkesbury race trainers on track there. And joining me today from the wider Hawkesbury region is Lucy Keegan from A.K.A. Racing Partnership, who's also based at the Hawkesbury. G'day, Lucy. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's been a long time since we last caught up. We usually seem to run into each other at the sales, don't we?
The sales, yeah, exactly. And I think the last time we saw each other was at the Premier Sale in Melbourne.
That's exactly right. Tell me, what have you got behind you there? It's an interesting little background you've got.
So that's actually the outlook onto my garden from my office window. And we have 2 colt yards, which, as you can see, are walk-in, walk-outs with stables, shelters. And the horse you can see there is the horse I actually bought at that Premier Sale, which is a hellbent gelding called Zarism.
And tell me about the facilities that you have on your property at Grosvenor, which is just 20 minutes from the track in the Hawkesbury there.
Yeah, so look, the farm's been a lot of work in progress, but had really good structure when we bought the farm initially, which was just over 3 years ago. So we've got 2 barns. One of them is an American-style barn. That's what we call our main barn for horses that are up and racing and trialling. We have another barn which is located next to our Olympic-size show jumping arena, and that houses another 5 horses. And that's similar to the building that you can see here in the background. It has walk-in, walk-out boxes, so they're a bit bigger and they provide a nice balance of inside, outside for the horses. And then we have turnout paddocks for the race horses, so we call those day yards. And then we've got 15 acres, which also has spelling paddocks, so we can spell our own horses here at home as well. We also have, as well as the arena for working horses, we have jump ring, which acts as like an oversized round yard. And we've got a swimming channel, so they can all swim here at home as well, and a horse walker to keep them occupied when it's rainy or the weather conditions aren't suitable for turnout.
How often do you get to the track at Hawkesbury, which is just 20 minutes away, to work the horses?
4 or 5 times a week for the majority of the horses. And what we actually seem to find works really well is we do like a rotation with them. So when they've trialled or jumped out or raced, they go and have a couple of days of turnout in the turnout paddocks and swimming at home and doing arena work. So it just works on a bit of a rotational basis. And also, depending on the individual horse and where they're at in their programme, some horses prefer to do a bit more swimming and working on the arena at home and just go down to the track for gallops. And others seem to really thrive on going down to the track, 4 or 5 times a week regularly. So, yeah, it just depends on the individual.
Obviously, because you're a bit of a smaller boutique operation, how does the training partnership with your husband, Jason, work?
Oh, look, it's fantastic. We both bring very different aspects to the business and to the partnership. Jason, by trade, was a horse breaker, and he worked for the Inghams before they sold out to the Darley operation. He was their sort of head breaker there, if you like. So Jason's very hands-on with the horses and the farm, all aspects of, farm work as well as the horses. And I get chained to the desk. We both ride. So we both ride the horses at home here and at the track. As I said, we both bring different things to the partnership, but it works really, really well. It's great.
You mentioned obviously Darley/Godolphin. You worked as a track work rider when Darley first set up at Osborne Park. How did that spark your interest in Australian racing?
It's funny actually, because I was looking for a position to spend the rest of my working holiday visa out here in Australia, and had moved away a little bit from what my qualifications are actually geared towards. So Fran Khan and I had been emailing each other about the track riding position at Darley, and she said, "I hate to ask, but why do you want to do this? Because you're overqualified basically to do it." And I said, "Well, I want to stay in Australia longer. I want to see out my visa. I used to ride race horses for a bit of extra pocket money in the UK before I went to college of a morning." And I said to her, "So I'd just like to do some riding and experience a different aspect to the equine industry and in Australia." And absolutely loved it. Peter Snowden was the trainer there at the time. They had horses like Sepoy and Helmet running. Sepoy won the slipper whilst I was there. So it was a really great time to be involved with such an amazing operation. And actually, I did go back whilst James Cummings has been at the helm to ride part-time in 2018, just as we bought the farm. We were just trying to make sure that finances were what they needed to be whilst we were buying the farm and setting the farm up. So I've had a couple of experiences of working for the corporation, and that property at Agnes Banks is just, it's incredible. It's another world.
You mentioned the Horseboat Bang on your Twitter profile, calling it your best friend. Can you tell me about the connection you had with that particular one?
Yeah, so after my time at Dali at Agnes Banks I went to work for Patnack at Hawkesbury Racecourse. And unfortunately, as we know, that operation folded and I had to find a new employer and a new sponsor. I was sponsored to stay in Australia by that time. And Chris Waller very kindly took over my sponsorship and employment. I spent 3.5, 4 years riding track work for Chris at Rose Hill. And during that time, Boban had just joined the stables and he was quite a little weedy 3-year-old chap. I'd ridden a Bernardini in England and I just had ridden him a couple of times when he was new to the stable, and I'd said to the assistant trainer, Peter Muscat at the time, can I stick with this fella? I like him. I think he's a bit quirky. I really like him. Knew nothing about him. Knew nothing about his history and that he'd had embargoes for bad racing manners and was a little bit unruly whilst he was still entire. So obviously he had the ultimate gear change. And I partnered him every day as his track work rider for pretty much the majority of his career, strapped him at the races, not for his bigger wins. There was a bit going on at that time. Jason and I were getting married and I have family here from the UK. But anyway, so it was a partnership for a very long time. And everyone that's involved with horses can hand on heart say that you have one in a lifetime, that you have just this very unique connection with. And he was certainly my one in a lifetime. He was just, it was an amazing journey that I had with him.
And you mentioned you and Jason getting married. It's always interesting to hear how people first meet. How did you and Jason meet?
I was trying to think of some really far-flung romantic story to tell you. And actually, it is romantic, but it's not far-flung. So we were both, I was riding Patnack Farm for Vic Thompson at the pre-training establishment there at Hawkesbury. And Jason had recently got his trainer's license and was bringing horses to the track to train them. And his initial attempts were to get me to the stud that he was running for the late Sid Kelly to see an orphan foal. And I said to him, I've just moved away from stud work. I'm afraid I'm not interested in coming to feed your orphan foal in the middle of the night for you. So anyway, it was through track work at Hawkesbury that we initially met. Yeah.
You did just mention the breeding industry. Having worked in it as well as doing what you do now, do you still follow it at all? And does it help you when inspecting and selecting yearlings at the sales?
Absolutely, yes, it does help with inspecting yearlings at the sales. I was involved in a little bit of a different side of the industry in the UK. I was working for a performance horse stud, and so a lot of their stuff is artificial insemination and embryo transfer, and that's what I was doing initially when I came to Australia. But I think it really gives you an eye for conformation, and then seeing different types of thoroughbred, which I've spent a long time since I've been involved in the industry here in Australia now doing. It definitely sharpens your eye for conformation, and you just learn to adapt that to the type of horses that you're then involved with. But yeah, it certainly gave me a very good grounding and certainly a really good veterinary aspect and perspective on it, being involved with the artificial insemination and breeding where it's, down to the 11th hour, particularly if you're doing frozen semen inseminations and that sort of thing. So it's a really different aspect, but it's certainly, as I said, it's a solid foundation. Yeah.
Back at home in the UK, you come from a show jumping background, is that right?
Yeah, I show jumped a lot as a teenager, actually, and absolutely loved it. I do miss it, and I wish that I was not quite as time poor as I am, because obviously there are now really good incentives with retired racehorses off the track and competitions and that sort of thing. And we rehomed a horse called Psychopatico that we part-owned and trained, and he's gone to a lovely girl called Kylie, who's just up the coast there near Newcastle, show jumping 1.10 m already within a matter of months.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I know. I look at it with a little bit of the green-eyed monster, like, oh, I wish I had time to be doing that because he's really super. But it's wonderful that he's gone to such an amazing home and that he's, found life after racing. So, yeah, it's great.
That whole life after racing thing is great. Like, you only just have to look at, for example, there's going to be an increase in the prize money with the show jumping during the Magic Millions, and it's combined with the polo too. I went for the first time this year to that event, and it was amazing to watch.
Yeah, it's such a good incentive because the thoroughbreds really are so adaptable, and whether it be trail riding or a bit of dressage or eventing, polo ponies or show jumping, they really can turn their hands, hooves to the majority of disciplines, and they have such a lot to offer after their lives racing. So I think it's a really good incentive to have that opportunity for them to then go on and do more once they've retired from racing, for sure.
What's the biggest thrill or win since you started training in partnership with Jason? Obviously, you guys are listed winners, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think probably the most memorable was training a double recently at Hawkesbury at our headquarters, and that was Cosluca and Sovereign Express. So that was really special for us. They're all special. They all mean it doesn't matter where they win to us. Each win, really does mean a lot, especially when you're in a very small team. So, but that was probably the most notable to date.
And obviously, being in the Hawkesbury there, have you had much of a chance to meet with and compare notes with Edward Cummings? I interviewed him recently, and he was very big on his trying to establish his own pathway, despite who his grandfather was and who his father was.
Yeah, for sure. And look, we see Ed quite a bit down at the track. Ed watches his horses work from the grandstand, and our horses are tied up over the stand side. So we also use the e-tracker system. And I know that that's a system that Ed uses for monitoring track gallops and recovery rates and that sort of thing. So that's something that I started to learn about and have an interest in from when I was riding for Chris Waller. And it's a really, really useful training tool. It's not something that you use as your only training tool, but it certainly does add an edge and a really good aspect to having that in your inventory for training your horses, for sure.
Obviously, it would be great to represent the wider Hawkesbury region. Ed's got Jewess. It's going to be interesting to see how Jewess goes in the staying races, the Caulfield Cup and the Melbourne Cup down here in Melbourne over spring.
Absolutely, yeah, that's really exciting, and it's a great promotion for Hawkesbury. And obviously, you've got Brad Widdup based out at Hawkesbury as well. He's the leading Premiership trainer. He does a fantastic job. So I think it's testament to, the club and the tracks there being able to turn out horses to the highest level and be competitive everywhere.
One last one, Lucy. What does Lucy Keegan Attard like to do in her spare time, if she ever gets any?
Well, when I used to have spare time, I love to read books. I'm a bit of a bookworm, so that drives my husband mad because apparently I pay more attention to the Kindle in bed than him. But anyway, we won't go there. I have my open water diver's certificate, so I love diving. Spent some time with my younger brother when he visited a few years ago, and we went diving off Lady Elliot Island up in Queensland, so that was fantastic. I come from a family of aviators. I'm ashamed to say I'm the only one in the family that doesn't hold a pilot's license of any description, but I keep toying with the idea of trying to get that done. So really enjoy that. And sports, there's a women's boxing gym down in Windsor that I used to enjoy going to and would like to find the time to go to that again. So yeah, just avid outdoors kind of person, but at the moment all consumed by the horses and the farm. But it's a lovely life, so no complaints.
Lucy Keegan Attard, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right.